tried starting a habit of reading quite a couple of times before, but I always just started reading. I read a couple of books and then I randomly just stopped. But this year, I actually started reading without stopping so far. I started in April, and since April I've read 17 books during the year, and I'm currently reading my 18th, and so I decided to make a video about the best books that I've read so far in this year. And I think that I'm going to make a video like this every single year at the end of the year, so you can also get a few recommendations from me on what to read. I'm gonna make a couple of other videos eventually about reading, because I want to make a video about how to read more. One of the things that really helped me to read more was this. It's a Kindle. I know that a lot of people are like, oh, I need the real books, blah, blah, blah. And I used to be one of those people as well. I was like, I need to feel the book. And I don't need fucking technology for everything, until I realized that I can't read the fucking book in the dark. I cannot really see without glasses, and if I don't have my glasses, I cannot just randomly increase the font size of the book, all of that shit. So this is like, I'm not trying to sponsor anything. I'm just saying, having this has improved so much on my ability to read more. Also because like it's very easy to have with me all the time, but carrying around a bulky ass fucking book in your backpack all the time that's also big, it's just a lot of hassle and all of that, and you have to take it out, you have to hold it, and the books are also more expensive. You have to go buy them, or you have to order them and wait for the delivery time, all that shit. So this has been the number one thing that helped me to read more. And another thing is just linking reading to another thing that I do very, very often. So for an example, if you go on public transport almost every day, you can link reading to that. But now let's get into the books. Of the 17 books that I've read this year, I chose 4 books, the 4 that actually stood out for me personally. Something that I noticed is that I've read a lot of just typical self-improvement books, mostly during the first half of the year, and then now that I look back at it, and when I had to choose my favorite books of all of these books, I realized that I don't fucking remember any of them. And I almost haven't, like I always try to implement some shit that was in the books, because I took notes and everything, I can look back on them, but nothing ever really stuck with me, because all of these self-improvement books, they're actually not that good. And the books that had a real big influence on me were usually not these books. But I'm going to keep this topic for another video. The very first book, however, is a self-improvement book. It's called The Millionaire Fastlane by MJ DeMarco. I really don't like finance books. I've read a couple of finance books because I'm in a situation right now in my life where basically my only option to ever be able to buy a house is to somehow, well, actually I have 2 options: get rich, or I don't fucking know, somehow find a money tree, or marry into a good family, I guess. But yeah, I've read a couple of finance books and I've hated pretty much all of them except for this one. And the main reason why is because this is not really only a finance book. Like, this book is so extensive. It covers so many areas when it comes to just your entire life. So it doesn't just concern itself about getting rich or any of that shit. It's an entire lifestyle. It helps you, like, it has systems on how to make difficult decisions, for an example, which is, in my opinion, very fucking useful. It talks a lot about relationships, like what kind of people do you want around in your life and what kind of people you don't want. And I think it's also pretty enjoyable to read. Like, I enjoy the style of the writer. It's really funny because I tried to like Google after things, and I found that a lot of people for some reason hate this writer because he's so full of himself and all that shit. And then I read some other guy who everybody seems to love, and I'm like, how can anybody love this guy? Fucking no personality, nothing. Dry as fuck to read, and it's completely clear that the person is a complete fucking psychopath who only cares about money. So that's the kind of books that I don't like to read. But this one wasn't like that, for me at least. So that's why I really like this book, and there are a lot of lessons in it that you can use in your life, even if you don't want to become rich or any of that shit, even if you do not care about money at all. A lot of these things you can use to just being good at a sport. And that's why I think this is not really like a true finance book, I would say. Yeah, it does talk about finance, but it talks about a lot of other things as well. And it says a lot of things about finance that you can use in other areas of your life. So I really recommend it. even if you do not give a shit about finance, I think this is an overall really good self-improvement book, and probably better than like 10 other self-improvement books that I've read together, because I actually remember a lot of stuff that was in this book, whereas I don't remember shit from all of the other books. And I've actually used ideas that were in this book, and I haven't used pretty much anything else in any of the other books, like consistently. Like obviously, if you read a book and you don't do anything afterwards, it was just a waste of your time. But if you read a book, you try something afterwards that was in the book, and it wasn't helpful, and you didn't stick with it, then you tried, but it was still a waste of your time because it was a shit book. The second book, and by the way, I am going in chronological order. I'm just saying that because it's not in order of how good the books are, it's in chronological order. The second book is actually the book that I would consider to be the best book that I've read, not only during this year, but I think in my entire life, and that is Brave New World by, I still have no idea how to say his name, I think Aldous Huxley, maybe. This book has been written almost 100 years ago, and essentially the writer imagines a sort of utopia where everybody is happy, everything is good, nobody has any problems, and the entire world is perfect. But when you yourself read this book, it sounds like pure hell. It sounds like shit. And the entire book is about actually not having any struggles, and the world being in complete happiness is maybe not the solution. And the funny thing is that this was written 100 years ago, and since then, a lot of the things that were in the book that this guy just imagined like 100 years ago, they have become true to this point. And it really is like a huge criticism on the current world and where the world is going towards. And I might eventually make an entire video about this book, because I think like I could talk about this book for several hours, because even though it's not a very long book, actually, I think it's like, 300 pages or something. I finished it in like a week because it was so good. But oh my god, there is so much content and so many things to analyze in this book, and there are so many things to learn. And this book changed my life more than fucking 10 other random self-improvement books together. Like, this book is a book that really makes you think, and a lot of people draw connections between this book and 1984. Personally, I've read 1984 after this one, because a lot of people said like, oh, if you like this, you're probably gonna like 1984. If you want to read both, I would say read 1984 first and then read this one, because for me, like, when it comes to my life philosophy, reading this and then reading 1984, I fucking hate that book. I'm gonna be honest. I think that book fucking sucks. And the reason why it sucks is because the entire message in the end in 1984 is, in my opinion, shit. Whereas in this book, it's actually good. And the two books, in my opinion, have two completely different mentalities. And I err completely on the side of the mentality of Brave New World. The third book that I've read was Greek philosophy. Hell yeah, it was The Republic by Plato. This is a little bit of a lengthier book. I think it's like 400 pages. It's not much longer than Brave New World, but in terms of reading it, I think it's much harder, and you have to read it in kind of lesser quantities. You cannot read like 100 pages of this in one day, because you're gonna be like, your brain is just gonna be fried. Now, I think this is a pretty good text if you're just getting into philosophy, because it's relatively easy to read, in my opinion. And it's also really, well, I guess you can't really say exciting, but it covers so many topics, while at the same time focusing on one like core topic. And in the end, it answers a great question. Basically, the entire book is about why being just is better than being unjust. Why being a good man is better than being a bad man, even though being bad has basically a lot of profits, because you can get a lot of money and all of that shit through lying. But why being good is still better. And I think this book is a perfect example of why trying to get information and like make it into forms that you can consume in less and less amount of time is actually detrimental. Because you can basically explain the same concept in 10 seconds, 1 minute, 10 minutes, an hour, 10 hours, and 100 hours. And which person do you think is going to know it better and is going to like adopt the mindset to his life better? The one who has heard about it for 100 hours, or the one who has heard about it for 10 minutes? or 10 seconds, sorry. That's exactly why I hate TikToks and YouTube shorts and Reels and all of this stupid fucking shit of trying to condense all of the information into shorter and shorter time intervals, because it doesn't work. You're not going to remember it. Like, I could say what this book says, what like the main takeaways from the book are, in just a YouTube short or a TikTok or whatever the fuck, in like 15 seconds, and the next minute you wouldn't remember it. The next day, like, you wouldn't even remember that you have ever heard about this thing. Whereas if you read the entire book, it's going to change your life and your view on life so much. The fourth book is going to be Beyond Good and Evil by Friedrich Nietzsche. This was the first book that I've read from Nietzsche. I'm not gonna lie, when I first started reading it, I couldn't understand shit. My brain was in pieces, but after a couple of pages, I kind of got into like understanding it a little bit more. It requires a lot of attention, and if you're a beginner reader, I do not recommend this. And I'm not saying I understood everything from it. I probably didn't understand like 2/3 of it, or maybe even more. But what I understood, I think it's a pretty good book, and I think that there are a lot of ideas in this book that make a lot of sense, to me at least. And the reason why I put this book here is because when I was reading it, I felt like I found somebody who thinks a lot like me in terms of questioning everyone and everything that there is, and not just blindly trying to accept anything that he hears. Because Nietzsche always quotes a bunch of other philosophers and talks about why this is shit and that is shit, and they said this and this is what I don't agree with and this is why, and blah blah blah. And I think a lot more people should do that, because there are so many people, especially in the fitness industry, like how many people just look at one person's content and they say, okay, I like this guy. Everything he says from now on is gonna be true for me, and I'm going to accept it as truth. And then you fall on your fucking face because they say something stupid, and then boom, it's not going to work. Even the people who I deem as mostly reliable sources of information in the fitness industry, even they say sometimes things that I do not agree with. I do not agree 100% with anybody, and you shouldn't either. And that's exactly one of the mindsets that Nietzsche has. He also talks about religion. I know that some people think that he's some sort of anti-religious guy, whereas like you just have to read the fucking text, bro, honestly. Like, he says in this book that religion should be something that you look at in terms of, is it improving your life, and what kind of effect does it have on the people, and not just blindly accept it, and that you're allowed to question all of these things, which of course goes against the principles of most religions, because most religions are a little bit sect-like, and they tell you that you cannot question anything, you just have to fully accept it, and that's how it is. But in my opinion, that's fucking bullshit. And so these were the 4 books. These were the best 4 books that I've read this year, and these were 4 books from 17. Next year, hopefully, I have read even more books than this year, and hopefully I will come back with more interesting books, because to be honest, I thought that I'm going to choose more, but 4 seemed like, this is not a lot, but at least I don't have to record for 2 hours. But yeah, thank you for watching the video. I wish you all happy holidays, and click here to watch my last video.